Chapter 18, The Dimension of Anti-Rationality. Anastasia, can it really be that modern mankind actually does live in the dimension of anti-rationality that the dark-haired youth mentioned? And what exactly is anti-rationality? How can we see this in real life? Thought or information appears, and we need to assess its reality only through ourselves. But how can we assess it, and by what means? If a person is living in the anti-rational dimension, then he'll think in the categories of anti-rationality. Yes, that is so. But rationality, all the same, remains within a person, although in a significantly smaller degree. But if you mentally appeal to it, it is activated, and then you can use it to help you identify anti-rational manifestations. For now, we will speak no more on this topic, Vladimir. For now, go take a stroll here around the glade, around the taiga, and reflect a bit. Here in this spot, rationality and anti-rationality are in balance, but in you they are not, and for that reason, help your rationality out. Activate it from time to time. How do I activate it? Just mentally say within you, rationality. Or better yet, rationality. I was left alone and tried to reflect from a position of rationality. And these are the conclusions I began to draw. The artificial world. Today's community of people lives in an artificial world, not a natural one. It created it and slavishly serves it. We have created an artificial world and live artificial lives within it. The real natural world is to be found along the side of the asphalt roadways along which modern mankind is rushing headlong toward an abyss. Artificial concepts have been implanted into the collective consciousness of modern people. Our scientists and our educated researchers have, in their great wisdom, started to call modern medicine, which has existed for only 200 years, traditional, while calling folk medicine, whose history is calculated in the hundreds of thousands of years, as non-traditional, at the same time as they have begun referring to healers, and here I'm talking about real healers, who are well versed in the properties of medicinal plants, as charlatans. The result is that the modern man ends up having to treat many diseases, ones that people just 100 years ago easily cured themselves of, at no cost, using herbs from their very own garden, using expensive pharmaceuticals on the advice of their doctor. Perhaps there should be two paths in medicine. We need to teach folk medicine in school and train specialists in medical schools. 80% of ailments can be cured using folk medicine, and this will significantly lower the burden on today's medical facilities, which will make it possible to substantially improve the quality of medical service. But to do this, we have to think in categories of rationality. Artificial plumbing systems. Mankind has buried millions of kilometers of metal pipes that they call plumbing systems in the ground. Colossal effort has been expended to manufacture these pipes and lay them in trenches. They require continuous servicing and major overhauls, which come at the cost of people's hard labor. Meanwhile, the water that comes out of the faucets in our apartments ends up being unfit to drink. And besides that, we have a natural plumbing system in the natural world, by which I mean not just rivers, but groundwater aquifers as well. Living, healing water capable of filling millions of wells flow through the earth's veins there. The natural plumbing system requires no repairs. What's more, it is capable of purifying polluted surface water and of saturating a vital product with minerals and other necessary substances. But the city person's modern way of life has deprived him of the opportunity to utilize the natural plumbing system that was designed and constructed by the Creator. The question arises, did man choose this way of life on his own, or under the influence of certain forces? In order to answer this question, let us take a look at one more case. We would be hard-pressed to call it anything other than the mental illness of society. What steps must the average family in Europe, America, or Russia take in order to acquire their own apartment or home? The anti-rationality mortgage. For example, they're advised to take out a mortgage, or more precisely, they are advised to take out a loan from a bank for a period of 20 or 30 years, acquire a modest residence with the bank's money, and then every month over the course of 20 years, pay the money back to the bank with interest. If the family isn't able to pay the money back, the apartment will be taken away. A young family has to spend 20 years living in fear of losing their residence and, as a rule, work at a job they don't like just so that they can get paid more. Grovel at their boss's feet out of fear of losing their job. But perhaps there's no alternative to this kind of disconcerting situation? But there is. And that's not all. The alternative actually shows that obstacles that stand in the way of young people acquiring housing have been artificially implanted into their young heads. These obstacles are virtual and intrinsic only to virtual reality. I will give you a totally typical real-life example. A young man named Andrei lived in the city of Vladimir, and on the outside he didn't look much different from his peers. He went to cafes and discos, he smoked and used alcohol. When he read about Kin's domains, he began dreaming of his own land and home. He did not have the funds to buy a plot of land and build a house, and his parents were not in a position to offer him financial help. In 2001, a hectare of land on a deserted spot overgrown with tall grasses near the village of Konyevo, 30 kilometers from the city of Vladimir, cost 30,000 rubles, equivalent roughly to $1,000 US. Nearly 50 families from among my readers have acquired their own hectares in this deserted spot and began putting up structures. People mostly in their middle years who possessed some financial reserves. Andrei took a liking to the spot on the bank of a forest. And there was still some free land left there. Driven by his dream of having his own homestead, he stopped frequenting the youth club scene, and by working hard was able to save up 30,000 rubles in the space of only 6 months and acquire a hectare of land in the deserted spot. But where could he get the money to build a home? At that time in the city of Vladimir, a square meter of housing cost 20,000 rubles, and thus to build a home only 50 square meters in size, he'd need an additional 1,000,000 rubles. Andrei wasn't about to take out a loan from the bank, and just so that he was not about to take out a loan from the bank just so that he could then spend 20 years paying it back with interest. At the age of 23, this young man went to the store, bought a good axe, and in the course of a year, all on his own, put up a wooden home on his plot. That's making a long story short. Here's some more detail. First, Andrei got a job in a company where there were master craftsmen who knew how to frame a log house. From them, he learned how to work with wood, while simultaneously earning the money to buy logs for his future home. On this young man's plot, a garden is now growing. A well has been dug. There is a pond, there is a wooden home, and people who are new arrivals to the settlement put themselves on the waiting list for him to build them log homes. Now Andrei is an acclaimed and respected master craftsman. You could say that through his own actions, Andrei saved 1,000,000 rubles, or that he earned them. I think that's not even important. He gained immeasurably more than 1,000,000. He gained confidence in his own abilities and a home built with his very own hands. I think Andrei will manage to find a worthy girl who will enter his home and bear him a son and daughter, and the children will tell their grandchildren who it was that built their home with his very own hands, who put in the garden, and who established their small motherland. Andre's story is not the only one of its kind. In that same settlement, there are other families who have built their homes with their own hands. I remember how my father and grandfather also put up their own wooden home, and the neighbors next to them, my parents' peers, did just the same thing. More than half a century has passed, but people still live in these houses, just as they did back then. And this is where questions come up. How could it happen that for half a century, society has been developing new building techniques, new materials, machinery, and devices which would seem to be more advanced, but in the end, the average family has to work hard for 20 to 30 years to get a dwelling that it is used to be able to provide. I'm so confused. Okay. The average family has to work hard for 20 to 30 years to get a dwelling that it used to be able to provide itself with in the course of a year or two. For many families, the housing question has become insoluble, and the government has had to take it up. Did this given situation come out by chance, or did somebody artificially construct it? That, however, is not important. The important thing is that the situation is absolutely anti-rational, but society, caught up in its everyday bustle, has turned out to be incapable of reflecting and analyzing. It has gotten used to the situation and cannot imagine anything different. Society has gotten used to anti-rationality, and it is ceasing to be rational. Why does love go away? Man's modern way of life has given birth to a great many problems that we are strictly forbidden to discuss, and since they don't get discussed, they do not get solved either. Billions of domestic conflicts take place all over the world, and they can get to the point where spouses fight with and murder each other. In so-called civilized countries, up to 80% of young people who enter into marriage divorce soon afterward. This process is preceded by negative emotions and stress of long standing, and children are made unhappy. Over the course of millennia, millions of localized wars have been going on practically all over the world between people who have attempted to establish a loving union. It isn't only both sides in these battles that take the cruelest of beatings, but their children too. This kind of situation has been presented to modern mankind as a given. It's natural, they tell us. Love comes and goes. But as it turns out, this kind of situation is characteristic only for people of the artificial world. It is not consistent with man's true nature. For the first time ever, the taiga hermit has shown that young people's initial attraction for each other is not love. It is but the urge to give birth to the great feeling which arises when three components are united. She identified these components and showed us the three ancient rites that help real love to be born. I have included them in previous books. I had to use the word rite because Russian lacks a more precise definition that expresses these rational acts by young people who feel attracted to each other and their parents. But the given topic, like many others, turned out to be forbidden for the mass media, and that's not all. They began using plausible pretexts to make efforts to slander the source. It got to the point that on a show called The Mysterious Anastasia on Russian Central Television's Channel 1, certain individuals began collectively declaring that people were going crazy from reading my books with the statements of the taiga hermit. They don't go crazy from reading porn magazines or bloody thrillers or watching movies about violence, but they do from reading philosophical statements about love and humankind's way of life. Ludicrous. This position makes it clear that there are forces in modern society that program social disasters. They target people and act through them, making use of their ignorance about what is really going on. And we can understand these people. Imagine what would happen if a person who has read the Ringing Cedars of Russia book series starts asserting that by using three ancient rites, modern newlyweds can, during their marriage ceremony, In the space of 30 minutes and in plain view of all our relatives, create a family homestead on a deserted spot, along with a garden that will contain 100 plantings necessary for the family's sustenance, that they can erect a home with all the necessary farmyard structures, along with devoted animals that seem to have been settled in them as if by magic. Modern people who have not read the Ringing Cedars of Russia book series might consider a person who asserts this fact crazy or gullible, but allow me to reveal a bit about this mechanism, the mechanism with whose help the given miracles really do occur. According to ancient rules or rites, you can call them what you want, a pair of young people who feel drawn to each other go out to the outskirts of the settlement, find themselves a plot of land no less than a hectare in size, or 2.5 acres, and build a small hut there. Together, they create a detailed and thorough design for their future homestead. For all intents and purposes, they are also creating a space where the energy of love can be found. In their design, they indicate not only the spots where their future home and farmyard structures will be located, but also where absolutely all the plantings will go. Doing everything to create the design and keep them busy for anywhere from 3 months up to a year. Doing everything to create the design can keep them busy for anywhere from 3 months up to a year. Once the design is finished, they go around to all their relatives on both sides of the bride and groom and invite them to participate in the rite of marriage. And each time they are at the home of this or that relative, they say, for example, "Ah, what a beautiful apple tree you have there." These words serve as a hint to the invited guest about what he should bring with him to the rite of marriage. In this particular case, a slip of the apple tree that the future newlyweds liked. To someone else they're inviting, they might say, for example, "What a feisty little coat you have." Coat? Maybe it meant to say colt. "What a feisty little colt you have there." Yes, that means that the guest doesn't need to think about what gift to bring the couple. He'll give them a colt, and so on. During the rite of marriage, the newlyweds will tell their relatives and friends, as if they were taking some kind of great exam of life in their presence, all about the design that they have created for their homestead, indicating in detail where everything should be located. Once they've finished the telling, they will give out a signal, and the relatives and friends who have gathered together will set out their living gifts precisely at the spots indicated by the wedded couple. The newlyweds, all aquiver, will observe as their closest relatives and friends engage in the great joint action. Then the now married young couple, having experienced great inspiration and emotional elevation, will be led away, each to his parents' home, and they will spend 2 nights. In the space of this time, the relatives on both the side of the bride and the groom will move previously readied structures to the spot piece by piece. At dawn on the second day, he and she will hurry to their new created family homestead, to their first meeting as husband and wife. It is impossible to describe what will pass between them and their new home, full of nothing but positive emotions and inspired, never before experienced energy of love for each other and their newly created space of love. What would have happened if the Wellspring people had told such newlyweds that there will come a time when marriage will be carried out in an entirely different way, that 2 young people will come to some building, sign their names in some ledger, and ride around in someone else's car that's been decorated with ribbons all around a city that does not and never will belong to them. After that, along with their invited guests, they'll take their seats at a table in some restaurant and eat food that was not prepared by the hands of their relatives' hands. They'll drink vodka, and then the tipsy guests and relatives will shout "bitter, bitter" to them, demanding that they kiss each other in front of everyone. And that's it. Next comes the so-called marriage bed and the lack of any pleasant after effects from what has transpired. And what's more, any space that the energy of love can fill is totally lacking. Such a thing couldn't happen. It could never happen, the Wellspring people, newlyweds, will say. Man's a rational being, not a crazed animal who would destroy love like that. Love that is just an embryo and has not yet grown strong. So who is it who's really going crazy? Judge for yourselves, esteemed readers. To answer the question of why love goes away, we can say that real, full-fledged love simply does not come to the majority of modern newlyweds because there is no appropriate space for it. What is love? It is a feeling, a great energy that is capable of inspiring a person to create, and that increases his spiritual powers and capabilities. It is a rational energy. It fills the space where two people in love are present and creates a unified whole for them, a space of love. Take a look at what happens nowadays. Newlyweds go to the marriage bureau and formalize their marriage. The marriage bureau facility isn't their space, but a temporary spot where they're spending some time, and what's more, divorce proceedings take place in this very same facility. And the rational energy of love is unable to fill a space like that. Riding around in a car, often someone else's, also isn't fit for the energy of love. It can't fill a modern apartment either, because after all, the energy of love cannot caress soulless, dying objects. And in a modern apartment, even the very new one, everything is aging and disintegrating with each instant. Nothing is coming to life in it, and the energy of love cannot make its peace with that kind of disintegration. When it's present in that kind of situation, it cannot give its blessing. What is needed for the energy of love is a living space that has been established by people. In the given case, by actual people who feel drawn to each other. It can't be any other way. The proof of this is the great number of secular divorce proceedings throughout the world. The question of why love goes away deserves to be studied from all angles, and I intend to devote my next book to this. A book in which I will tell of the ancient land where people knew the secret of everlasting love. Today's approach of love is truly anti-rational. Governing the government. There are various methods one can use to influence people. We're not excluding the government here either. The most potent among them is the image. People grow accustomed to absurd conditions and images and accept them as givens. There's an image that tells us that the government, including the State Duma too, where laws are developed and enacted, must definitely be located in the center of a big city. We've gotten accustomed to this being the way. But does this make sense? Where did the prophets receive their revelations? Where did the wise men do their reflecting? Whence did they bring us the divine laws? Moses received the tables with the 10 Commandments after going into seclusion on Mount Sinai. Christ went off into the desert for 40 days. Buddha spent several years deep in the forest. Muhammad spent months in seclusion in the cave of Hira on the mountain of Jabal al-Nuar. Philosophers and scholars, Confucius, Lao Tzu, Kant, Nietzsche, and many others have spent years living in seclusion. But where is our State Duma's building located? Where do they write our laws, these wise men chosen by the people? Do you recall? Our State Duma's building is located at the intersection of busy highways. Could we possibly create more absurd working conditions for our national chosen ones? What do we have here? A roadside Duma? What causes empires to die out? I think I'm almost done. Okay. I can cite a great many historical examples of images influencing human society and inducing planetary disasters. But for the contemporary person, particularly one living in Russia, the most obvious example will be the situation connected to the demise of the Tsarist Russia and later on the fall of the USSR. From a spark, a flame will burst forth, said the leader of the worldwide proletariat, V.I. Lenin, speaking of the Bolshevik newspaper Spark, in which the Tsarist regime was smeared. All according to plan, a negative image of Tsarist rule took root and a new beautiful image was created, an image of Soviet rule. Tsarism was toppled. A new empire, the USSR, arose and began developing. an empire possessing a huge army and equipped with nuclear weapons. But only 70 years later, the great empire of the USSR collapsed into several separate states, ones not always inclined to be friendly to each other. It was the politicians who had signed the agreement concerning the division, as well as the economic and political situation, that political scientists identified as culprits in the collapse. When we take a closer look, we can see all of this too, as simply the result of the action of images. Let's recall I don't know how to pronounce it. Solzhenitsyn's gifted books about the Gulag and the works of other masters of the pen who smeared the USSR. Other writers at the same time were creating an image of the prospering Western states where, unlike the USSR, store shelves were groaning beneath an abundance of all possible products, and happy and free people were riding around in fancy cars. At the same time they were speaking of the merits of Western civilization, they remained silent about the problems existing there. Russia's future is also defined using images that are taking roots in the minds of and souls of the people living in the country. Unfortunately, this is a whole pleiad of images that are leading toward the annihilation of the state. The cult of violence and the cult of money are forming the image of destruction in thousands of movies and theaters and on television. Catching up to the West. That's what many of our politicians are propagandizing. No economic or military achievements and no calls to be patriots in our motherland are capable of opposing these images. The only thing that can oppose this image is a different image, an image of creation, an image capable of inspiring millions of people. Anastasia has created it as a counterweight to the armadas of destructive images. Hundreds of thousands of people have taken up the image of a beautiful future country and have contributed their own ideas to it and have begun making it a reality. They've begun building Kin's domains. This grassroots initiative was in line with the government's plans. Many well-known politicians, government figures, well-known academics, cultural figures, and religious leaders have made positive statements about those who are building Kin's domains. I'm not going to bring in their statements here, but anyone who wishes to do so can learn about them on the site anastasia.ru. Now, of course, these statements have inspired people, but they are nominally off the record, although they are also infinitely bold. After all, the rational words have resounded within the landscape of anti-rationality and penetrated it. Some of the Taiga Hermit's assertions might seem fantastical, and that's the way they seemed to me too when I first started spending time with her. Now, 15 years after my first meeting with her, there is much that I have had to rethink. It is we, contemporary society, who live in a dwelling land that is fantastically unnatural for living a rational life. Anastasia speaks about rational reality. She is establishing it methodically, and she will establish it. I will try to help her, and hundreds of thousands of people are already helping. And here's what else is interesting. In electronic and print media, literature, and the movies, there are practically no positive heroes who can commune with the earth in a rational fashion. Call to mind the way of life and dwelling land of any main characters. For the most part, they're all shown in apartments, offices, restaurants, casinos, on the streets of big cities, and in places like that. And if they do not show a person who communes with the earth in a conscious way, and this happens extremely rarely, then this person is presented as immature or an imbecile, and human society is methodically and persistently being indoctrinated about the kind of dwelling land where he should pass his life. Did this situation come about by chance? I'm even convinced that it did not come about by chance. It's leading us toward a disaster. A personal, social, and planetary disaster. When I was talking with Anastasia later on, after I'd done some thinking on my own, I said, with certainty, I am absolutely convinced that contemporary mankind is living in the dimension of anti-rationality. It thinks in the categories of anti-rationality because it has no clear plans for how to construct a harmonious future. All it does is state the obvious, the fact that it is coming to an end, and speak about that.